What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. First, I have a short intro. Go follow me if you're not at COJAC Podcast. And if you want to support the show, whatever, I got stuff there. But thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. So I'm super excited to have this guy on the show tonight. All I do is repost memes, and I tell my wife and all my friends, like, I'm not like a funny guy, but I can never figure out the Twitter humor. It's something I can't do. But the guy that I have on the show tonight has figured out that Twitter humor and way to post. So his posts are hilarious. So go follow him if you don't know him, at Brad the Rambler, and I'll post it later. But so I'm really excited to have Brad on the show. So Brad, thank you, dude, for coming on. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure to be here.
And also, guys, if you're not following him, he has a tinfoil hat on in his profile photos, and he keeps in character all the time. So you have to give anyone credit, the dedication to it. So do you make a new tinfoil hat each day, or is this the same one that you put in a box, keep it safe, or is it a daily fix?
Oh, daily. This one's been going on for a good while. I made sure to make this one real robust. Multiple layers, have to keep out the negative energy. You know what I mean, man?
I do. And you think it's been working so far?
I've been trying to keep the good vibes, so I'd say it's been somewhat successful, you know.
Love it. And before we were talking on the show, Brad on Twitter or on Instagram, you have like 20,000 followers, 90,000, and you have 220,000 followers on TikTok. Because my wife has TikTok. I've never, see TikTok videos, but I also see a lot of conspiracy people. They usually seem to get kicked off of TikTok. What was the video that like spurred your, thousands of subscribers or whatever they call them, their followers?
Well, on TikTok, I mostly started out just goofing off, not really meaning to blow up or become popular or anything like that. Mostly joking around. And I accumulated like 20K followers relatively over the course of about 6 months or so. And then this last about January, February, I had a couple videos on TikTok go very viral, mostly talking about things like Terrence Yeeki, OKC bombing, the Fernald School with the radioactive oatmeal experiments.
Oh, I don't know if I know
Operation Sea Spray, I think it was called, or was it Seafoam? Either way, just a few videos that. The most viral was Gary Webb.
Gary Webb.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And, winning the award for journalism from the CIA, of course.
Right.
But those videos all went very viral within a week, and I accumulated a lot of followers from that. And I've kind of tried to spread out a little bit on the social media platforms.
Yeah.
Been successful on Instagram, Twitter, not as much, but it's going good.
Yeah. Well, and did you watch? I think what's that? Kill the Mockingbird. That's the Gary Webb movie. Have you ever seen that?
I have not seen To Kill a Mockingbird.
Ah, damn, dude! You got to watch. You definitely have to watch it.
I got to watch more films, man. I got to read more books.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I brought that up was because I saw that movie very early in my conspiracy days, and I was shocked. I was blown away. And then so I bought Gary Webb's book, whatever, I forget what it's called, The Dark Alliance. I think that's what it's called, The Dark Alliance.
I believe so. That's what it was.
And so I was I was excited to read it, and then the foreword in that book is written by who's the black congressman in California who's just they're all so corrupt, but she's the black lady, she's old.
Maxine Waters?
Yes, Maxine Waters wrote not the intro, whatever that's called, the foreword or whatever. And then I couldn't read it after that because I was like, this is odd. You know what I mean? Like, why is Maxine Waters writing the foreword to this book about you know, I just, not to doubt, but then I couldn't read the book. So I was like, now I can't trust a single thing this book's going to say. But I found that like
Got to
super
worry
odd.
about limited hangouts and whatnot.
Yeah. I don't know. I just found that, and I think, I don't know if we talked about this. I've been doing my last few series on it's called a book called The Politics of Heroin. And basically it just talks about how from the 1600s to now, the international heroin opium trade has always been dominated by governments, always been dominated by, you know, whether it's a legal commodity at the time, you know, like coffee and tea, to the Harrison Act. And they just switched from now government controlled monopolies to cartel monopolies that they just can't stop. They can't figure out how to stop these. You know, they can.
Oh, they can't figure out how to stop them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're just so smart, dude. They're so brilliant. The government, they have no idea how to stop them. They just can't. They just can't stop them. But what was my? I don't know what my point was with that, but doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But anyway, so we had a few topics that we wanted to talk about, and your pinned tweet or whatever was about LBJ, and I have you know, I attribute LBJ to really destroying America with his Great Society, creating the welfare state. But what's your LBJ thread about?
Well, it's about the political assassination of this one federal agricultural agent by the name of Henry Marshall, who was investigating corrupt business deals by a LBJ associate by the name of Billy Solestis in Texas during the early 60s.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt.
Oh.
Continue. Sorry.
But anyways, he was investigating Billy Solestis in Central Texas in like 1960, 1961, involving illegal cotton allotment buyouts and whatnot. And he ended up, you know, he reported the activities to, you know, the Secretary of Agriculture and whatnot, the Ag Adjustment Agency, I think it's called, whatever. But anyways, it kind of dunked him into the middle of something much bigger than himself. With this, when he reported Billy Solestis's activities to the federal government, he got a reply back to get a position in Washington. And he took this as somebody associated with Billy Solestis being able to, you know, grease the palms, move things around, get him transferred out up to HQ so he wouldn't be investigating Billy Solestis anymore.
Okay.
And anyways, he had meetings with Billy Solestis's lawyer about how can we like smooth this over, make this go away. And he was like, it's not going away. You're going away. And he kept having meetings with like county commissioners and farmers about, hey, don't be doing business with this fella. He's not to be trusted. This is illegal. You shouldn't do this. And then one day he winds up dead on his ranch and shot 5 times with a bolt action 22, dead beside his truck. And when the local sheriff and the police rolled up, the sheriff instantly ruled it a suicide. There were no photos, no fingerprints, no blood taken, and the truck was washed and waxed the next day.
Well, that's totally normal, dude. What's your concern?
Absolutely.
What's your concern?
Nothing, just a coincidence, of course, you know. But anyways, it kind of caused a bit of ruffling around in the world, you know. Like when it went to like the person that does the embalming, the autopsies and whatnot, the coroner.
Yeah.
He was like, there's no way this is a suicide. There's no way. This is really odd and I don't trust it. And he was telling the judge that, but the judge said, I'm going with the sheriff on this one. I'm writing this down as a suicide. And so that kind of died down a little bit. But then the FBI comes in and arrests Billy Solestis for like fraud and conspiracy of business and whatnot. And like the agricultural secretary at the time was like, without the investigation done by Henry Marshall, we would have never got this guy. And that kind of opened things back up to investigate Henry Marshall's death. The FBI got involved, started looking into it under the behest of RFK. JFK was also had a personal interest in this case. You see, this is before the assassination of JFK, 1961. And anyways, so they're investigating this. Someone in the FBI is like, oh, this is most likely a suicide. Looking at him, looks like he shot himself 5 times by himself. And then they're like, okay, let's dig him up. Let's look at this. Let's do an autopsy. And they found that he had carbon monoxide in the system, currently at like 12%, on time of death, upwards of 30. When they found him, his head was up beside the exhaust pipe. And so the main FBI agent investigating this said, oh, he shot himself 5 times. And then like he realized he wasn't dead. So he just went up and sucked on the exhaust pipe until he perspirated. J. Edgar Hoover actually talked to that agent about this and was like, I don't know about this, and personally wrote down somewhere, doesn't seem possible for this fella to have killed himself. J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, that guy.
Yeah.
And so you have this one Texas Ranger step in named Clint Peoples, and he's like, I don't believe this. I'm going to look into this as a personal matter for me. And so he starts asking people around, was there anybody from out of town that was somewhat looking around for Mr. Marshall? And he asked this one gas station attendant. And he says, yeah, that morning some fella came in and he was asking for directions to his farm. Gave him a description and whatnot. And a Texas Ranger sketch artist sketched it out. And it matched the description of this one convicted murderer named Malcolm Wallace. And this Malcolm Wallace had worked with the Department of Agriculture before. And like he had his own controversies in the killing of this one fellow named Kinser, who was a mutual lover of Josephia Johnson, LBJ's sister.
Okay.
And so this Kinser fella, he owned a mini golf course in Austin. And he was asking Joseph Johnson, Joseph, I believe was her name. Wishy-washy on that one. But he asked her if her brother could get him a loan. At this time, he was, I believe he was a senator at this time, LBJ. And anyways, LBJ supposedly took this as blackmail because apparently Joseph had mentioned some of his shady business dealings to Kinser. And so LBJ gets this one fellow, Mac Wallace, like I said previously, who was also a mutual lover of LBJ's sister.
Okay.
And so he goes up to his mini golf course and blows him away in the middle of the office. A witness hears this, gets his license plate. He gets arrested and goes to trial. And at trial, the jury's like, all but one person on the jury is like, death penalty, death penalty, death penalty.
Right.
One juror's like, let's give him life imprisonment. Okay. And so they go to court, and then the judge browbeats them down to a 5-year sentence. Yes, browbeats them down to a 5-year sentence. And then once it's done, suspends the sentence, and Mac Wallace walks free. Wow. And it comes out later in newspapers that a lot of these jurors' families were being threatened, possibly. And that the local sheriff was kind of in on it. You know what I mean? This was down in Austin, not in the area where Henry Marshall was killed. But this Mac Wallace fella, convicted murderer, used to work for the Department of Agriculture. And so, yeah, they think he was probably the one who offed Henry Marshall. Did a pretty hatchet job, if you ask me. The whole thing was, and then like pretty much, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. But yeah, it gets to that point. And so this kind of ends with the FBI investigation and like the grand jury in Robertson County where it happened. Kind of like there's one person who's his name was Prize Metcalf, and he was the son-in-law of the sheriff, and he was a juror on the grand jury, and he was kind of pushing them to say, oh, this is a suicide. This is a suicide. There's no way this is a murder or anything like that. So it gets labeled a suicide. Anyways, so Billy Sol Estes, he goes to federal prison for all his shenanigans, you know.
Yeah.
And like Clint Peoples stays on the case for a long time, even after retiring as a Texas Ranger. And I think in 1979, he did an interview with Billy Sol Estes saying, where Billy Sol Estes says, when I am freed, I will be putting all the dirty laundry out there.
Never a good thing to announce.
Oh, yes. But anyways, in 1983, I believe, he's released from federal prison and goes before a grand jury in Robertson County, Texas, and says, LBJ ordered the killings of Mr. Kinser, Henry Marshall, his own sister, supposedly, and JFK.
Wow.
And of course, at this point, LBJ's dead. So's his assistant. His name was Charles Carter, I believe, something like that. I get names messed up all the time.
So do I, yeah.
But anyways, all these supposed defendants were already dead, so everybody was like, well, we can't convict them of anything. But the testimony was enough to get it shifted to homicide. And that's sort of where it ends off there, but for the whole story. But
yeah,
not a lot of people talk about it. It was in the national news a lot of the time, actually, in the 60s and again in the 80s when it came out. And it kind of starts this web of the corruption and the business dealings of the Johnsons and their association with this one electioneering, somewhat crime family called the Parrs. They were deemed the Dukes of Duval County. They were heavy in Democratic politics in Texas and are said to be directly involved in the Box 13 scandal. Have you heard of the Box 13 scandal?
I have not. No.
So in 1948, I believe, the primaries are being held for the Democrats for the Texas senatorial election. And so LBJ loses the runoff, it looks like it. But then out of nowhere, a week later, a ballot box shows up with 202 ballots in it. 200 for LBJ, 2 for Stevenson, who he was running against. You know? And LBJ wins the election by 87 votes out of almost 1 million cast.
Hey man, he just won. I don't know what are you inferring here? What's your implication?
I don't know. But anyway, Stevenson, the primary challenger, takes this to court. And it goes all the way to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
Where they rule that it's up to the party to see how it runs its primaries. And so that's how LBJ becomes a senator.
Interesting. Wow.
It just goes to show there's a lot of electioneering going on even back then in the United States. It's not a new problem, to say the least.
No. I think so. I never heard, but I do remember something in Texas. I didn't know it was with LBJ, but it was that they found one box that
Box
as like how you
13.
said, like 200 were for LBJ, 2 were for the other guy, and I think it was even a heavily Republican area, if I'm not mistaken. Like it didn't make any. It shouldn't have been that a drastic of a.
Well, it was the primary.
Yeah.
He later in the general trounced the Republican. Absolutely.
Okay. I see. Okay. So it was a close between. Okay. Understood.
It was a primary between Democrats.
Got it. Okay. Interesting, dude. So you think based off and so this stuff, so that the electioneering manipulation that helps him become senator, and then the murder and the agricultural that happens during his presidency.
No, this happens while he's vice president.
Oh, wow.
This is why JFK kind of took it as a personal thing to look into.
Okay. Interesting.
And so it kind of somewhat leans towards this being part of the internal battles of the Kennedy-Johnson administration. Kennedy made a deal with the devil, essentially.
Right.
And so Roger Stone actually, Roger Stone, he likes to believe that Mac Wallace was the shooter in regards to JFK. I don't really believe it because two of the confirmed killings that Mac Wallace did for LBJ were hatchet jobs, to say the least. So I don't know if I agree with that. I personally believe it was probably one of George H.W. Bush's Cuban crew, because at the time he was working as a CIA asset in like the Houston area and whatnot with the Cuban exiles and the Gulf Coast, that sort of thing.
Right.
Some people want to say Woody Harrelson's dad was one of the bums on the grassy knoll or whatever.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's just, it opens up a can of worms that you start looking into more and you're just like, oh, this is so slimy.
So and what was the Cuban guy's name? I'm sorry.
This Cuban crew that George H.W. Bush had. I don't know the specific names.
Oh, their crew. Got it.
Yeah, it's a crew. Like he was working with Cuban exiles in like New Orleans and whatnot, which kind of ties in to Lee Harvey Oswald at the time, who was also hanging out with some Cuban exiles in New Orleans.
Interesting.
And stuff like that.
The how we were talking before, and my listeners know I've been doing a series on the politics of heroin, and so I never knew that the like Lansky and Luciano and Trafficante, Cuba was a major, huge hotspot for the mob.
Oh yes,
that was their like HQ. I mean, they I think it's not Lansky.
It was Vegas before Vegas.
Yeah, exact. I think they had something like 35 casinos ran by Lansky there. I mean, they had their secret meetings in Cuba. And I think this was the 20s, maybe 30s, definitely pre-World War II. But I had no idea because I just I've my whole life, I've known Cuba as, you can't go there type of thing. I just had no idea the mob ties that were linked in Cuba.
Of course, that also has connections to JFK, supposed, electioneering in Chicago during the 1960 presidential election.
Can you elaborate? What do you mean by that?
Well, JFK's father had mob ties.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some irregularities in the election process in Chicago.
Okay.
So it's somewhat implied that there was some electioneering being done by the mob there in regards to the 1960 presidential election.
Yeah.
Some could even say there might have been some like that in Texas with the Parr family and LBJ, and that might have a connection to why JFK picked him as a running mate.
Because he wasn't he was not his first choice as a running mate, yeah. And I forget what what the logic was is why JFK ended up going with LBJ, but I know there was something. I remember oh, go ahead. Yeah.
The official narrative supposedly is that he was trying to get the more conservative wing of the Democratic Party on board because he was considered very much progressive. He was a Northeast progressive Democrat compared to, Dixiecrats down in the South and whatnot. And supposedly he chose LBJ to help get them on board. And plus, LBJ was like a senatorial whip, I believe. So he was like the guy greasing the wheels to get things done.
Yeah. There's some quote, and I wish I could remember it. And I don't know if it was LBJ's wife or somebody, but they were on like maybe it was like a campaign bus or something like that. And and never mind, because I can't remember the quote, but the whole LBJ, I mean, his whole backstory is just so odd. Like, this guy is unlikable. I think he had like some insanely low approval rating that's as abysmal as Joe Biden's is. I mean, it was horrible. It made zero.
Yeah, he was unelectable.
Yeah, exactly. Best. Yes.
And I suppose LBJ saw JFK as his meal ticket. Yeah. Kind of how Dick Cheney looked at George W. Bush. The real power behind the throne sort of thing.
Right.
Because JFK, he was progressive. He was somewhat of a firebrand, but he couldn't really get a lot done without help. Okay. And so he chose the backroom backstabber, LBJ, as his running mate. Somewhat help grease the wheels, get more broader support, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I always find it amusing too. Obviously the political parties, the guy from the 60s Democrats, I mean, there is no correlation, but they were anti-war at that time. They were the anti-war party. I get kind of. And I just remember though, LBJ, he was so pro-Vietnam because he would have lost the election if he wasn't. And I think that was one of his debate topics, because whatever Democrat he was running against who was anti-Vietnam War, he was basically calling him a pussy. You're a commie, you don't want to fight in this war. I mean, he was just such a disgusting human being that's viewed way too favorably among history.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I love seeing, not calling anybody in specific out, but I see a lot of people amongst Democratic, progressive, Democratic socialist circles saying, the last effective president we had that was a progressive was LBJ. He got so much done for us. But none of them really talk about how we got it done, did we? This guy carrying out making sure political assassinations gets carried out while he's vice president of all things. And then, president loses his head and he steps in, gets carte blanche to pass any legislation that he wants, the Great Society, immigration reform, a lot of economic stuff as well. And then, in 1968, you get the 1968 Gun Control Act, which brings forth 4473 background checks and serial numbers on firearms.
And that was under LBJ.
Yes. The whole thing with that was because, we need more background checks to prevent another assassination.
No way, dude. So that's what I never heard. So that is what spurred. So pre-1968, no serial numbers, no background checks.
Serial numbers weren't required before.
Were not required. Okay.
A lot of manufacturers still had them, but as a policy, keeping track of firearms.
Okay.
But it wasn't like you were doing background checks and whatnot on FFLs. You used to be able to just order guns in the mail, supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald did.
Wow. I had no idea. Dude, that's fat. I know the problem, reaction, solution, the history of rhymes, but that's fascinating. I had never heard that was what spurred we can't have, look at all these presidents being killed. We need, how can we stop this, guys? How do we stop this?
Another thing that people need to look into are the presidential assassinations that didn't succeed. Like Gerald Ford had 2. And this was after, the resignation of Nixon. Gerald Ford becomes president.
Yeah.
And so he has to pick a VP for himself. Guess who he picks as his VP? Nelson Rockefeller, grandson of John D. Rockefeller. And then within a year, there are 2 assassination attempts on Gerald Ford's life within a span of 17 days. First one was an FBI informant, and the second one was a member of the Manson family.
I never heard that, dude.
Because it didn't succeed. It wasn't really anything at that point,
And what do you think? Because this might be too broad of a statement. It seems like if you're getting shot as a president, you're doing something that somebody doesn't want you to do. I wouldn't put, I'm not in the JFK's our guy camp. And same way, I know so little about Gerald Ford, but what would you, was there a reasoning behind the assassination attempts on Ford?
I don't know for sure, but I just think it's just so funny that he makes George H.W. Bush head of the CIA and Nelson Rockefeller as VP, and then he has these assassins coming after him.
Yeah.
And we all vaguely know the kind of association that the Manson family had with the CIA, chaos, the real history of the 60s, right. CIA and Charles Manson, that one fellow wrote that book, which itself is a little bit of a limited hangout and has some interesting parts of it too.
Dude, come back to that, but continue. Go. Yeah.
But anyways, the people need to look at the assassinations that don't succeed as well. And there was another one that was against Jimmy Carter. I forget the 100% the specifics of that, but supposedly this one fellow got sort of tied into this conspiracy. He was supposed to be the distraction guy, shooting up blanks in the air to distract people while somebody else was supposed to dome Jimmy Carter.
Okay.
I don't know the whole story of that one. I need to look into it more, but it's just interesting.
Do you know who the guy was that put the assassination attempt on Jimmy Carter?
No.
Do you know his name?
No, I don't.
Raymond Lee Harvey.
Oh, yeah.
Just again, dude, it's just it's a coincidence.
It's just a coincidence, folks. But anyways, a lot of stuff like that. Then you have Reagan stepping in, and he has a couple assassinations attempts against him with who as his VP?
Bush.
George H.W. Bush.
Right.
It's just fascinating how these people are in certain positions while these things happen. Just a weird coincidence, don't you know?
And then I also I remember the FDR assassination attempt, and FDR was a banker's bitch boy. I mean, he was so corrupt beyond belief.
Oh, he was a dictator.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. But
the 22nd Amendment, the term limits one for presidents, 2 terms. That was like a passive admission that we were living underneath a dictatorship for 12 years. Okay, let's be honest.
But I'm sure you know this, but they had, he had the alleged assassination attempt on FDR's life from all the, not let's ignore that the Roosevelt family has blue blood ties going back hundreds of years of bankers, politicians, top dogs. FDR at post World War I created a company. I think it was AIC, American International, which basically just ravaged post World War I Germany, buying pennies on the dollar, reselling. But this guy, he cares about you. But then the bankers, they just hated him so much. The Rockefellers or JP Morgan, or whoever, they orchestrated this elaborate plot to assassinate him because they hated him so much. He was hurting the fat cat so much. Obviously a lie.
The business coup?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's what it was called. Yeah.
Yeah, the business plot with like they wanted to get Smedley Butler to lead members of the American Legion, like 150,000 to march on Washington and whatnot, according to his statements.
Yes. Yeah.
It's just fascinating, just looking at the more nitty-gritty parts of history, stuff like that. And like,
no, I never knew about those other assassination attempts, though. I wonder how much of it is kind of like how media constantly attacks Trump, which you think would hurt, but actually bolsters his support with his supporters because of that attack. So it makes me wonder, are some of these assassination attempts the same kind of same play? Like, oh, these guys are doing such a good job, or doing, fighting so hard for us.
Oh, he's making enemies with the right people.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can also look at their challengers that ended up getting assassinated, like Huey Long.
And because I only know such a little. I know he would have beaten FDR. Every man is a king, but could you talk more? Because I don't know if everybody knows that story.
Huey Long was a kind of dictator himself in Louisiana, creating his own political machine and instigating his own reforms for like giving out free school books and whatnot, stuff like that. Just every man a king. He was like this right wing. Not really. No, it's hard to say. He was a populist,
right,
progressive autocrat, essentially. Kind of like a Bonapartist figure.
Ooh, well, I love Napoleon. So, okay. All right, continue.
Yeah. But anyways, he was attacking FDR from the left on a lot of issues, wanting to create a wealth tax over set amount, fighting the millionaires and whatnot. And then one day, he just gets shot up. He just gets shot up in public. Has his armed bodyguards all around, still gets shot up.
Mm-hmm.
Bullet holes are still there is it at the hill? I think it's at the hill that those bullet holes are still in like the columns and whatnot.
Wow.
Or was it at the House of Representatives in Louisiana? I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyways, he gets publicly assassinated, so he's no longer a problem.
Yeah.
That sort of ends that.
Right. And yeah, because he's another guy I have to research so much more, because like you said, I know he was a populist, and I don't know where you fall on the political spectrum. I recently, I guess if I had it, I would put more of my label on like a monarchist side of things. But I from the little that I know about Huey Long, I mean, he sounded like a guy that truly wanted what was
every
best.
Man a king, a true monarchist.
but he seemed like a guy that truly wanted the best for the American people. He was, like you said, he was a populist. He didn't believe, and he wasn't a communist. He just believed that you shouldn't have people that have enough money that you can't make in a billion years.
Yeah, essentially that was this whole thing. The whole story with him is largely fascinating. I haven't read 100% into it again, but how he pretty much just 100% controlled Louisiana for such a long time. And a lot of people like to say that his institutional corruption is somewhat what led it to continue to be corrupt in its current state right now, which is not great.
Yeah.
Like you had actual felons like Edwin Edwards becoming governor, because he was running against, David Duke. So they were like, we're going to trust the crook over the grand wizard, okay? All that sort of business, Just
dude. That's just and to jump to quickly jump back to LBJ, and because you're right, people, it's just funny, they view FDR as a people's president. Oh, this the New Deal. It's a safety net, and what people, because like you, as you know, so few people read, so few people can pay attention for longer than 30 seconds. What they don't realize is a lot of these like LBJ's Great Society, on paper, they make perfect sense. Absolutely, you should be able to afford health care, and you should be able, if you get sick, to still pay for your house. But they don't do it for those reasons. They do it because they want to decrease competition. So that's why the New Deal was pushed through, and it was pushed through with GE, with General, with Rockefeller help, and all these the fat cats, because I think the rule was you had to provide health insurance if you had over 50 employees, and on and on and on. And all this stuff was done because they knew any up and coming company that may have a better product for a cheaper price, well, they're not going to be able to afford to make it after 5 years, because they're not going to be able to provide health insurance for their people. They're not going to be able to provide these benefits that the Standard Oils are able to provide for their people. It's just funny that how history is written by the, as we always say, the victors. It's just it's an amusing concept.
Oh yes. A lot of the one thing to definitely look into with the FDR administration is a lot of the Supreme Court decisions during that time. Like I think one was, I think there was this one farmer in like Ohio, and they had passed legislation to restrict the amount of wheat you could grow to stabilize wheat prices, whatnot, during the Depression.
Yeah.
But this fellow was growing his own wheat to feed his farm animals.
Okay.
I believe this was like USB Fishburne or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyways, he loses, and that because they want to, under the guise of interstate commerce, and like how him not buying wheat on the market might affect the price. And so that gives them the ability to say, hey, you can't grow that much wheat, even though he was growing it for himself. That sort of thing. There's a lot of problems with the legitimacy of the Supreme Court, especially when they have these decisions still on the books. A lot of judicial activism at the time, FDR trying to pack the courts, it's somewhat nudged them to, get with the program a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think FDR, he expanded the court, didn't he?
No, he tried to, and that was like his big controversy, to pack the Supreme Court.
Okay. I didn't know if he actually, okay. So he was attempting to, I didn't know if he was actually successful in moving it from whatever, like 5 to, 9 or whatever. But so he was just attempting to do that.
He was attempting to do it. And it was his one real big controversy that even amongst progressives supposedly stains his legacy up until recently, until a lot more people have started advocating packing the court or expanding the court as a minimum, a little bit more advertiser friendly language for all the normies out there. Oh, we're going to just expand the court so we can have more people on our side on the court. And this isn't going to cause a problem where we're racing to the bottom, where we have like 20 Supreme Court judges and whatnot.
Racing to the bottom. That's exact. It's just I did well in school, but I learned all my history post school reading and stuff like that. And they don't and obviously schools wouldn't teach these things, but there's just so much. If you have a very cursory knowledge of history, these people that history they write so favorably, they look so great on paper. I guess that's something that's always frustrated me, is I always make the joke, if history says they're a bad guy, 9 times out of 10, they're usually not. They're usually on the people's side, and vice versa. If history writes them as an amazing, a maverick, a person changing the world, they tend to not be that person. They're actually just sold their country further up the river than the previous guy.
it really takes a lot more nuance to understand the political situation in America in terms of like how it's like a multi-level patchwork of different forces that sometimes work together and sometimes don't. Sometimes they feud against each other for decades, like the FBI and CIA did for a long time, supposedly, up until about 9/11, when they create, the Department of Homeland Security to bring all these people into one sort of organization so they have control over what they're doing and whatnot. Like the whole Finders controversy, that was sort of like the FBI poking at the bear CIA, like, oh, what is this going on here? What are these groups of individuals doing with children in the dark at a park, and they're all malnourished looking and dirty while you're walking around in suits? What's going on here? Why are there tunnels? I don't know. But anyways, like you have those kind of feuds. Like the whole thing with the FBI looking for Hitler in South America was sort of a jab at the CIA, saying, "Oh, you can't do your job. We're going to find him."
Interesting.
Like you have those feuds between different like government entities all the time, and people don't. And it's like not just these entities themselves; it's sometimes groups within them that are fighting against each other.
Interesting.
Like I said earlier, how J. Edgar Hoover didn't believe that Henry Marshall was a suicide, but the guy investigating was like, "Oh, this is definitely a suicide. Don't question it.
Right.
Not one bit. Not despite him having blunt force trauma to his head, and being shot 5 times with a bolt action 22. Completely possible. Completely possible. That sort of thing."
Well, it's like Gary Webb. He did the double headshot to his head, but suicide. Oh, yeah. As everyone who shoots themselves in the head, they always get 2 shots when you do that.
Oh, you always have to have a second chance, man. Change your mind. But anyways, yeah.
Oh, I always ask people, and I'd be interested in, and I ask this question to lots of people, but I obviously, as you know, CIA create, 1947, anti-communist, you have Operation Gladio, all these operations, God knows billions, if not trillions of dollars were spent to beat back communism. They start the internet, they restart the mafia, they restart the heroin trade to help fund this fight against communism.
Seventh Kuomintang.
Exactly, dude. Yeah, exactly. But so I want your opinion on is today, if we compared the CIA's operations, propaganda, I always like the boomers of the Rocky movies, pro-America, anti-Russia. And now you have this switch. You still have the anti-Russia aspect, but it's clearly an anti-American agenda propaganda being pumped out by the CIA and all these different spy agencies. What would be, if you agree with that, what would be why is that? What do you think the change was? Was it always a lie? Was it just a way to make money? Was it just a problem reaction solution to cause fear? Yeah. Do you agree with that, or did you see that in your research?
You mean like the propaganda and its creation to, like anti-American propaganda?
Yeah, exactly. It was this switch from beat the Japs, all destroy the Huns, to now every white person's a bigot in America and we need to get rid of them. I know they don't have a commercial like that, but you understand what I'm saying.
I think it's not even really that. I think they're still beating the drum of the American civil religion that was created under LBJ. This idea of we have to fight for a better tomorrow in the name of John F. Kennedy. This is what he would have wanted. He became the martyr. It became the somewhat origin myth for the modern civil religion in America, how we have to just come together, man. Don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country, sort of thing. And I don't even think it's anti-American propaganda. I think it's propaganda in defense of the civil religion that was created at that time and is now somewhat being questioned. What is the government's role? Were they actually doing things in our best interest or not?
Yeah.
And when you start questioning that, you start questioning the civil religion. That's what I kind of think what's going on. And like trying to create it. Another thing too to think about is when the internet was created, it destroyed the idea of a monoculture. You know, the idea of like, oh, cheeseburgers, Coke, American Pie, blue jeans, that sort of thing. It somewhat shattered that notion and like shook up the bag of broken pieces. And so everybody is somewhat isolated in person. Everybody is isolated in person, but they can find their tribe online. And this is where you get people falling into these ideological rabbit holes.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's nothing really to denote what is American culture today, because all cultures have been fragmented so much to this point that they don't really have the ability to quite control it as much as they used to. But they're starting to try again, especially with like using influencers, privatizing their operations, you know. MK Ultra never ended. It was just privatized, that sort of thing.
Agreed.
And like these psyops, they're not really coming from the government quite as much anymore. They're coming from these NGOs that are allowed to, you know, wish around this money and whatnot, do whatever they want to do, spin up whatever they want to say. What is the narrative? What is this? What is that? And it's like this complex, it's decentralized the apparatus to the point where it's very hard to destroy. Like in the 1970s, you had the Church Committee that exposed a lot of what the CIA was doing, like, you know, MK Ultra, Project Artichoke.
We have a few heart attack guns. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, COINTELPRO, that sort of thing. And that somewhat died them down a little bit, and it caused them to look for alternatives and start working with other intelligence agencies outside the United States. Like in Africa, you had the Safari Club, which was kind of like the Five Eyes of its day back in Africa, like with South Africa and some other regimes there, where the CIA was working with them to stop communist influence in the continent.
Okay.
Killing off local leaders and whatnot, that sort of thing. It caught, like, the 1970s was a little bit of a drawback for them in terms of their influence, and then it kind of made a comeback, as you know, with Reagan and whatnot. Like, we got to get all this dark money from Iran-Contra, that sort of shit.
Right.
Oh, another funny thing that I learned recently, the lady that hired Lee Harvey Oswald at the book repository, later she would go down to Nicaragua with this peace group that wanted peace in Nicaragua and whatnot. And apparently she was taking some very thorough notes in their meetings and whatnot. It is supposed that she was working for the Central Intelligence Agency.
No, dude.
No.
They've never used anthropology for psychological ever. They've never done that. What are you talking about?
No. Another interesting thing is supposedly Tucker Carlson also went down to Nicaragua.
I feel like I've heard. I know. I mean, his dad. He was head
Voice of America. He was all part of Project Mockingbird and whatnot.
Yeah.
Also, going back to, you know, Chaos, the true history of the 60s, the CIA, Charles Manson.
Go back to that. Yes.
Tucker Carlson's father gave a lot of information to the author for that book in regards to Manson's handler, I believe. So, you know, that sort of thing. Just a lot of coincidences of people wishy-washing around.
Right.
Kind of getting up to no good with some projects. That sort of thing.
I didn't hear that. So is that why you made that comment about the geek? It was kind of a limited hangout, the book?
Yeah. It kind of, amongst some other conspiracy theorists, I suppose, or parapolitics people is probably what they prefer to be called. they believe that it was done to limit, the outreach about how MK Ultra was involved in COINTELPRO and stuff like that. American Gladio, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Using cults and whatnot to diffuse certain movements and whatnot. Like Laurel Canyon and what happened there with Jim Morrison and his father, who was admiral during the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Totally not connected. Not connected. Nothing spooky going on there.
Dude, my one buddy, his name's the Odd Man. I bring up Odd Man probably every show, and I'll tell him I brought him up here. But he brought up a great thing that like blew my mind. And it's kind of simple, but MK Ultra for people that maybe struggle to accept that brainwashing. He brought up a point about if you've ever taken hallucinogens, like as you're coming down, you definitely don't feel relaxed. You feel like you just had a journey, like whatever you may did, it was an experience. And sometimes it may have been traumatizing. And so he uses that example to show like how much easier it would be. Have you ever read any of McGowan's Program to Kill?
Not yet. That is on my list. That is like number one on my list. But like, there was also recently a study that came out that showed that different forms of psychedelics can somewhat leave you in a suggestible state for an extended period. Like ibogaine leaving you in a suggestible state for up to several months. Something to do with mind plasticity, causing you to be more open to the experiences and ideas.
I agree. Yeah.
But another interesting thing is that there was an operation in the CIA during like the Church Committee to use MK Ultra to distract from what arguably could be worse experiments done underneath Project Artichoke, which was the precursor of MK Ultra. How that one scientist got drugged up and jumped out of a window, supposedly.
Frank.
Yeah.
Dr. Frank something. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of weird connections with things. There's a lot of like sometimes these rabbit holes aren't dug by rabbits.
I like that.
But like, it's just a hole to bury you in to distract you from what else is going on.
Absolutely, dude. And like how you said it, MK Ultra. I mean, you don't these days. You don't need to dose someone with acid and put them in deprivation chamber for 60 days, because if you just get them on social media young enough, you promote, push the right people, the right you that's way easier than stealing somebody for 60 days and dosing them with inordinate amounts of hallucinogens. I mean it's a much cheaper, and people they're openingly, they excite, they freely go onto this brainwashing site to be told what to think, feel, etc., etc.
Yeah, of course. Like thanks to like Volt 7 released on WikiLeaks, we know that the CIA has been experimenting with memes as a form of propaganda and psyops.
No way.
They had their own like folders of templates to create memes. I've seen a couple of them. They look like shit memes to me.
I'm sure.
Thankfully, they don't know they don't know memes.
No,
they don't know memes. No, but they probably hire people that do. And memes in their actual definition are self-replicating ideas. Dawkins and whatnot. He created the idea of the meme.
Yeah.
And using memes as a way to disseminate ideas, worldviews and whatnot. Yeah. It might also, it can cause people to believe things that they wouldn't believe otherwise, just because there's a level of humor and you have a positive association with it because of the humor, because it makes you laugh, that it starts ingraining itself into your thought process. Despite like, if you were just did a little bit of self-cognition, think about, how do I actually think and what do I actually believe? You start snapping out of it a little bit. You're like, what am I saying that I'm into just because of memes? Yeah. What am I saying that I believe just because of these memes that I've been laughing at for so long and these people have been making jokes with? Yeah. And how it can manipulate your mindset.
100%, dude. So I know we're getting, but I got a few. If you can, like 10 more minutes, are you all right for like 10 more minutes?
Oh, sure.
All right, because I got a few questions I want to ask you. So first, I guess what I'd like to hear is your opinion on the Russian Ukraine war that's going on right now. What do you is this a just a forever war to keep money flowing, to launder money? Is this a actual battle, an actual animosity between Russia and the West? Is it even happening? Is this war? Are people actually dying? What's your take on that whole shit
Well,
show?
I think the war is very much real. I think people are actually dying, of course.
Okay.
And also, I'm a person that believes in sovereignty for people and nations. I don't believe they should be just kicked around all the time, And so, in some aspect, I feel that for the Ukrainians, I believe they should have their own state. I don't support offensive wars at all. Like, of course, there's a bunch of stuff about like, oh, was this instigated? Was this because NATO's ever encroachment? That's an idea. I hate war. I hate all war. I wish war would end. That is my feelings on that. I know that sounds like a bit of a cop out to some degree, but philosophically, that's where I stand.
I agree with you. Yeah.
There's certainly some aspects of what happened in Ukraine back in 2014 that are interesting, Euromaidan and whatnot. Very wishy-washy on that. What happened in Odessa was disgusting, And then also there's the idea that like Azov is an aspect of like American Gladio, operations, stay behind forces.
Yes.
The ideas like that. It's a recent issue. So it's very hard for me to speak out on it because I don't have all the information after the fact,
Right.
That sort of thing. I definitely think there's a lot of money laundering going on, of course, with the operations, how he had to fire these recruitment chiefs and whatnot because they were fudging numbers, taking bribes and shit like that. There's always graft in everything involving the government.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think that's so you think it's actual battle thing, actual things are, this is it's a real war. Do you think there is a goal to this? Is this just a pure money laundering operation, or is this goal to eventually kick off World War III?
I don't think this is going to kick off World War III. I hope not.
Right.
Anyways, but like, it's definitely ratcheting up, especially with these F-16 shipments from the Netherlands and Denmark that are going to Ukraine now. It's really hard to say because it's currently happening. I said earlier that I don't like to somewhat just speculate on topics that are currently happening, but I like to think that this has been something that's been going on since before 2014. You had young Senator Obama going to Ukraine to look at munition stockpiles and stuff like that in like 2004, I believe. And of course, there's all what's happened to Russia in recent memory since the 90s, and like there has been transcripts of calls between Boris Yeltsin and Bill Clinton regarding the rise of Vladimir Putin and like how kind of Bill Clinton kind of gave the go ahead for that. And then like how Russia wanted to join NATO, but that kind of could have been just a sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say, but I do not trust Vladimir Putin. I do not like the Russian state because it's kleptocratic, it's corrupt, political assassinations, all the stuff I don't like. So that's kind of my stance on the issue. I think it's two states going to war at the expense of their populations.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like a gang war, in my opinion.
Where do you fall, Brad, on the political spectrum?
It's hard to say. I would say somewhat in the area of Lysander Spooner. You know, the American abolitionists created the American Mail Company to go against the United States Postal Service. He was described as a little bit of an individualist anarchist, a mutualist abolitionist of slavery and whatnot. Kind of in his direction, but maybe a little bit more to the right in terms of business and whatnot.
In terms of what?
In terms of business and whatnot. His whole idea was that everybody should be self-employed and that these larger corporations are largely functions of the state and like should be separated. Kind of like a libertarian.
Yeah.
That sort of direction.
Got it. You are you happy with the current trajectory of the Mises caucus? And I'm not like I follow Liberty Twitter, but I'm not a libertarian.
There's some things, man, that rustles my jimmies about them. Not really the recent stuff, but like this fellow named Shane Hazel. He was the libertarian candidate for Georgia governor.
Okay.
Kind of spoiled it a little bit. Okay. But his whole spiel was being against the murder cults, you know, the military industrial complex. And all the while he was talking about this and had his political career, he was working for a subsidiary of Raytheon selling night vision to Gulf states. And he only got the job because of his military service. It's like special forces or whatever. And so that was a giant piece of shit. And then like he tried to dox several people that were talking about this. And then I tried to bring it up with the Mises Caucus. And a lot of my posts got deleted. And I got muted. So I can only suspect that Michael Heiss didn't like me poking at one of his friends.
Yeah.
In general, I think it's just a fucking clown show over there. Just a bunch of people trying to build up their own personal brands at the expense of, you know, progressing an ideology.
Yeah. I'd agree. Yeah, it's just and there's so many, you know, I guess that's the best way. You put each side has good ideas that I agree with all across this spectrum here. But if you're the best way to make sure no one can group together, you say, no, that's actually this, that's this, and that's that. You know, you'll never have any semblance of cohesiveness, an agreement, camaraderie, because they put them on the opposite end of the spectrum when they're really not.
Yeah, they just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, especially like that was a couple years ago with the whole Shane Hazel thing. And then like recently, I believe his name is like Clint Russell or something like that.
Yeah, Clint.
Yeah. Whenever that whole controversy about JFK Jr. saying, "Oh, I'm gonna pass an assault weapons ban." Yeah, and they were like, "I am so shocked. I am so shocked."
Yes, I remember this. I remember this. Yes.
I'm so shocked that this was said. Oh my gosh. I trusted him. When you look at his background, he's a Green New Dealer who called the NRA a terrorist organization just a couple years ago. But none of these people seem to give a shit because he just vaguely was calling out the state and whatnot. Oh, they killed my uncle and my dad. Right. And then he just goes along with everything else. And I was like, when they were complaining about that, I was like, y'all fell for old populist parlor tricks of being just as vague as possible in your political stances to garner enough support to have a soapbox and then just pulling it out from under them. And then Clint blocked me for that. Big old L7 weenie. So it just grinds my gears a little bit that these so-called political activist influencers are just so thin-skinned and they don't do their homework and they just a lot of them seem to be looking to enrich themselves.
Well, I think, yeah, and I don't know if this is always the case, but it seems like people that gain popularity, you always wonder, like, where did you come from? Like, how did some people are very charismatic, and I can definitely see why they're successful, far better on a microphone than I am. But then you see other people, and when just how you had a simple question, and it wasn't, you weren't using ad hominems, you weren't saying you
Yeah.
were posing of the opposite viewpoint. He's just so used to his group of SEALs clapping for him that you're gone, right? It just doesn't. And then yet they'll make a tweet like, "Oh, the left, they can't have," and the people, they do it. Everyone does the exact same thing all across the board.
Oh yes, like we're just going to use just catch-all terms like the wokes, the wokeism. We got to fight against that. And then when you ask them, it's like they don't give you a good description, and it just become a catch-all terms for things I don't like. Like there's some elements to where you could say that, but it's just become like a right-wing just slur to throw at people.
Absolutely, dude. The thing that is the boomers of the left's the real racist and the right's the real when I see, I literally, it cracks me. I can't. How many times have you seen, no, the left is the real Nazis and then the right are the Nazis, because people's historical background can't go anywhere else besides World War II, where they've just basically been told good guy versus Satan. And that's all they can figure out. That's all that they can't comprehend any beyond that.
They both still worship the civil religion. They're just calling each other heretics.
I like that, dude. That could be on a t-shirt, Brad.
Yeah.
And then my last question, then we can wrap it up. What's going to happen here with 2024, dude, with the presidential election? What if you had to make a prediction? Is Trump going to win? Is Biden going to win again? Is RFK Jr. going to win? Are we going to have a president? What's going to happen?
It's real hard to say at this point. I think Joe Biden's going to win again if he doesn't die. That's where I'm at. I don't think Trump has the gas anymore. I think he's just kind of playing on the defense right now with all these convictions and these charges, not convictions. He hasn't been convicted yet. Have to get that correct. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And like we saw with the midterms, how we thought, everything's gone to shit. The Republicans are going to have this red wave.
Absolutely. We absolutely did.
And then it was just piddly, just squat, nothing.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen this next presidential election.
Interesting.
If they don't take out Trump or if Joe Biden doesn't die.
Yeah.
RFK Jr. is not going to be president. Ron DeSantis, probably not. I hope not.
No. He's taking too much Ozempic, bro. He's going to be he'll be weighing 90 pounds if he makes it that far.
Oh, gosh. And then there's Vivek Ramaswamy, I think his name is.
Yeah.
He's just a con man.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Yeah, like his supposed successful business is losing $1 billion every year, and now he's
didn't know that, but not surprising.
And supposedly his whole idea for inheritance tax that's over 60%. That it's just these people are not serious. Well, they are serious, but they're kind of just not serious about running the country or being president.
No,
it's just kind of become a grift circus,
Yeah. So it's like a reality show, dude. It's just a reality.
Like Mike Pence knows he's not going to be president. He's just running so he can get those campaign contributions,
Agree, dude. Or maybe I guess they hope they get picked up by maybe a cabinet man. I don't know. Mean, because you're right, because that Vivek, he has to know, dude. No, you rapping "Lose Yourself" or whatever. You're not winning, buddy. You're not winning with this. Oh my gosh! And then we'll end. I saw you had some. What's your I promise last one. I saw you had some Napoleon tweets because Napoleon's movie. 1 second here, Brad. 1 sec.
Oh, what is this?
So look at this I got here. So it's Napoleon's battle maps.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So what's I always like to ask, what's your are you excited for the movie? Are you a fan of Napoleon? What's where do you fall?
I wouldn't say I'm a fan of his actions, but I think as a character of history, he's definitely one of the most interesting people that has ever existed.
I'll accept. I like it. All right, I'll accept. That's a fair answer. That's a fair answer. I do find. Oh, go ahead.
My only complaint with the movies is how dark and dreary it looks. And the fact that Joaquin Phoenix is older than when Napoleon went into the second exile.
Yes, no one cares, but I think he was emperor at 30, dude.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Joaquin, I mean, I don't know what, but he looks at least 50 in the movie, and nobody after leaving that they're gonna go, oh, let me look up his. I think, and people, they're also so dumb. They're like, oh, 1800s. Well, they all died at 35, but which wasn't this was still amazing that a 30-year-old man was crowned emperor of France or whatever. I forget what his exact title was at 30 years old. So that they shouldn't have picked They could have picked so many people that would have done a better job to demonstrate that Napoleon wasn't just some old fart, that just came. He was a young guy.
Of course, yeah. Like I like Joaquin Phoenix's acting.
Same, yeah.
But I don't think he was the best fit. Maybe if you wanted to do like a melodrama about his time in like St. Helena, it would have been a good choice.
That would have worked.
I would have watched that, but like I don't think most people would.
No.
But I think it could be.
They wouldn't even know what that is. They wouldn't even know that.
Of course, yeah. They'll just be like, well, where's the fighting? It's going to be like fucking Logan Paul when he tried to watch Oppenheimer. They're just talking, bro. I'm a big fan of any historical movie. Like Master and Commander is my shit.
I have to watch. Because I love it. What time period is that in?
The Napoleonic Wars.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's such a great movie.
I remember it coming out when I was in middle school. I didn't know who it was. I knew nothing else beyond that.
It's just one of the most like chest hair movies, but not in like an overzealous way. It's like just down the boys on this boat, bro, just service to something greater. That whole energy, like fighting for survival. Oh, love it.
I do. All right. Well, then I'll have to put that on. That's on my list. Then I gotta watch that and Kingdom of Heaven. Those are my two. I gotta get on my list.
Love Kingdom of Heaven as well.
All right. If you like them, dude, I'm putting them on. Well, Brad, this dude. I could talk. I mean, I could talk this shit with you forever. But where can people? Where can they find you? We got to get you more, because we gotta get your Twitter numbers up, dude. You have 90,000 on Instagram, 200 on TikTok. Where can people find you, support you, all those good things?
Well, I have Linktree in the bio of all my social media accounts except for my YouTube. I have not done anything on my YouTube yet. I plan to in the future.
Nice.
And but yeah, just look up Brad_the_Rambler on like TikTok, and on Instagram you'll find me instantly. On Twitter it is just Brad the Rambler, no underscores. Perfect. And yeah,
I'll put all the links there, but because I got to check out my wife has TikTok, so once we get off here, I'm gonna have her pull up your TikToks here. But dude, thanks for doing this. If we'll definitely do it again. And guys, thanks for people in the chat. I'll finish Politics of Heroin. Like, I'm all done with it. I just have to do some of the notes, but it's awesome. It talks about France, Indochina. It gets even crazier. So we'll do that soon. But Brad, thank you for coming, and everybody have a great night, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everybody. Peace.
Bye.